So we're up here to 124, and what I've got is a little bit of what you might laughably call lecture here, and then some demonstrations. So we're up to the chapter in programming, very simple programming. If you know any programming, you'll already know this much. But if you don't know any programming, you should learn a little bit. So these are the bare basics of simple programming. Let me bring up a Kali machine. Guess this one, I don't know. That looks like the one to use, all right. All right, and let's make a new terminal. All right, there we are, new window. All right, and make it big. All right, so let's see if I have 124 in this thing. I do. Okay. All right. So make my window as big as can reasonably be handled. All right. And shove this over to the side. All right. So if you want to make, you can execute commands, of course, by just typing them at the command line here. And if you get tired of that and you want to make scripts, you can make scripts with any text editor like Nano. So let's make E1. And if I put in echo, some commands here, I'll just put in these. All right. All right. Let's put in hello. All right, and then those things, I'm not going to worry about them. Let's try running this one. Now, if I don't make the script executable, and I don't put any shebang line at the top, I can still run it by putting bash in front of it. Bash E1. We'll run it, and it prints $0 equals E1. Now, notice what happened here. I typed bash, and this is the name of the program, and the name of the program appeared there. So the point of this is it's showing you how to use command line arguments. Now, if I want to make this the usual kind of program where you only type the name of the program, then I have to add the shebang line here, and the path to the executable to run, which is that. And now it will run if I just do this, but what's wrong? You guys should know what's wrong. Why won't it run?
Because of the permissions.
What's wrong with the permissions?
They need to be set to the root, to root.
I don't know. If I do
Executable.
Right. If I do ls minus l, E1 is owned by root, but it's not executable. It's got a minus sign there. So I have to change that with chmod and add executable permission to it. Now if I do ls minus l, now it's read, write, execute. And now I can just run it with E1. All right. And when I do, since I ran it with only one character, with one string on the command line, the first one works. If I do this, now the first variable is E1, the name of the program. The second variable is foo. And so this is how you pass command line arguments into your script. If I look at the script, oops, cat E1. All right. So $0 is the first element on the line, which is the name of the program itself. And $1 is the second one, which is foo. And you can have as many as you like, at least up to 10. And I think there is some way to handle more than 10, although I've never done it. So that's how you can pass in command line arguments to your script. There's how you make it executable. So now we can make a script that will do a ping scan. So let me see what IP addresses we have around here. This machine is in NAT. Let me put it in bridge so I'll get to a real network that goes somewhere. Now, if you change your network environment, this ought to fade out, and it did. And then it ought to turn bright again, that little icon. And supposedly that means it got a new address, which, as we saw last time, is questionable. It got a 147, 144 address. That's good. All right. And I'm on CCSF guest. So I think that means there's nobody else on my network with me. Let's try ping the broadcast address. And then I think in Linux I have to put in this -b. There. And I'm only getting answers from one object, which is myself. So we've set our Meraki routers to put them in isolation mode like Starbucks. So even if a bunch of students are using the same router, they're all in their own VLAN. I don't know if they implement it with VLANs, but it has the same effect. You can't see anybody but yourself and the router. So anyway, I can do a scan, 147, 144, 221. Let's try that. And I'll put in this stuff. 147, 144. 144 is what I'm going to need. All right. Let me get my IP address again. 147, 144, 221 is what I have. Okay. So, get rid of the colors. They want me to put the network in there, so I guess I can do that. All right, let's try it. So I should be able to run it that way. So if I chmod +X ping scan, and then I run it with no argument. This is a standard thing you do, and let me cat it to point this out. This is what you traditionally do. It's a handy trick. If you put in the wrong number of terms on the line, like this has just the name of the program and no arguments, then you print usage. So it checks to see if something is wrong. In this case, it just looks to see if the second argument is blank. What you often do is look at the number of arguments and see if it's not the right number, and then it will just print out the usage, and it won't run the program. It'll just end up quitting. Otherwise, it attempts to do the scan. So let's run this thing correctly and put in the start of the network, and now it should, oh, that's cat. Okay, go up here, there. All right. And now it should attempt to scan all these networks, 221.1, 221.2, 221.3, and so on. So it'll take a long time, because I haven't changed the default timeout, and this is a whole lot slower than a professional product like Nmap, but it's now doing a lot of scans. And if I hold down Control-C, it will cancel them faster and let me out of here without waiting forever. All right, now, one thing worth mentioning is this trick down here, these backticks. Those backticks mean execute that command and take the result and put it here in the middle of this command. So it's a strange thing. And by the way, I've learned to quit using those stinking backticks. They're hard to find on the keyboard, they're hard to print, they confuse people, and there's an old-fashioned way to do it, which is really better, which is dollars. At least I think it's better, it's easier to read. Dollars and then parentheses. That means the same thing. It means execute this command, sequence 1 to 254. And that just gives you a bunch of numbers. So if I do that, in fact, let's try it here. Sequence 1 to 10. There, that's what it does. It just gives you a bunch of numbers from 1 to 10. So that is, what you're seeing there is a way to make a for loop, an easy way to make a for loop in Bash. This is Bash shell scripting. It is a very clumsy language. It is very close to DOS command batch shell scripting, and in there you also find that things like math and loops are very difficult. And even decisions with if statements are pretty confusing. You have to have these square brackets and stuff like that. It's a very old, very clumsy language, and you can't do too much with it. So Bash shell scripting is useful when you're doing something very simple, but if you're doing anything a little more complicated, then it gets tougher. So let's take a look at this cleaner ping scan. This shows you a couple more tricks of Bash that are worth knowing. So let's call this ping2 and put it here. And I'm going to just do the first 5 to make it faster. All right, so first, let me point out the last one. In fact, I'm going to fix them both. Let me do this. Let's fix the last one so it does just the first 5 also. All right. And run the last one, and then the next one, let's talk about it. Okay, so here's the last. So it does a ping, and what comes back is several lines of text for each ping. Now what we would like to do is print something smaller than all this garbage as the result, and that's all the next one does is filter the result. So this one, it does the ping. Now if you put a pipe after the ping, instead of printing it to the terminal, it'll put it in a temporary file and feed it into the next command. Next command is grep, so it's going to look for a line containing 64 bytes. So let me, let's stop it. I don't know what a comment is in this. I wonder if this is. We're going to find out. I don't know what a comment is in Bash. Does anybody out there know? Is it pound?
Usually pounds.
It works? Pound, okay, good. That's what it is in a lot of languages. So I want to stop here. So let's take a look. Notice how there's various lines here. And one thing I'm not seeing is any 64 bytes because I have to ping something that answers. So let me find out what answers here, which is 158. Okay. And let's make it So it goes from 157 to 159. There. Now it will actually get an answer. All right. And let's run ping2 on that address here. All right. Okay. Shemode. All right. So now I should be able to see it do things. It'll do the, well, all right. Let's go to the previous one and make it go from 157. Say 60. What's my IP address? It's 158, so I should really be hitting it. All right, so the previous one was ping scan. All right. So there it pings something. When it pings 158, it also gets no answer. How rude, I can't ping myself? All right, I see I made a mistake here or what? ifconfig, eth0. If I ping myself, which is this, it's 158. That should answer, I would think. All right. All right, some of you brilliant people, what have I done wrong here? Why doesn't it work? When this thing scans 158, it doesn't get it. And it should just be doing ping minus count 1, that number. Ping scan, 57 to 160. So if I do this one, and that, maybe I need the dot. No, let's see. There. Oh, now I got an answer. Good. I got an answer someplace in here, right? Packet filtered. I got a very strange answer. All right. Well, I'm not going to struggle with it much right now. I just wanted to show you this stuff of filtering a result with cut and sed. So let's play this one. If I do ifconfig, eth0, I get too much data. Now suppose I want just the IP address and nothing else. The first thing is I don't want to have so many lines. So I do ifconfig eth0 and then run it through grep for something that's on that line, like inet. And if I do that, I'm down to 2 lines. So I guess I need to include a space after inet, so it's not inet 6. So now I've got the right line. Now, the line still contains too many fields. So after you've filtered the line you want with grep, you then cut with a delimiter. So if I cut with a delimiter of a space, all right, and then I look for one field. Let's try field 0. Okay, they're numbered from 1, fine. So field 1 is a blank. Field 2 is also a blank. What's going on here? Field 3. All right. I should have picked out this line here, and I guess it's doing these spaces one by one, which is pretty annoying. But I may eventually get there. All right, 15 is broadcast, so it's up there somewhere. 11, 12 is net mask. So I want something before 12, like maybe 10. There it is, field 10. So this is the string that will give you that number. And now I can use Control A to go to the start of the line. I can do ping, and then this. So now it will run ifconfig, pick out the IP address, and then ping it. So it does 2 commands in sequence there. And now I'm pinging myself. So anyway, that's a useful trick. You should know how to clean things up, and I know you have to do that kind of stuff for the OSCP certification, which several students are working on. It's quite useful if you want to automate anything. All right, so that's bash. And as you can tell, I'm not very slick at Bash. I used to do a lot of Bash, but I started doing a lot of things that Bash couldn't handle it, and I switched to making Python my main language, which is a lot more fun. You can do everything in Python. And you'll see a lot of the projects in this class will be using Python, and I'll show you some stuff later. So here's an example from the book that's going to just connect to a port and see if it's open or closed. So let's do port scan.py. All right. So it's going to ask for an IP, and it's going to ask for a port. So this is the socket library we've already been using in your homework with the Python stuff. You import socket, you create a socket object. This, by the way, is the specific parameters you use for an IP version 4 socket, but if you leave it empty, that's the default. So I typically don't bother putting that junk in. Then you try to connect to that IP and that port, and if the connect works, if the answer to this is 1, then it's an error and you get this. If the answer to this is 0, then the port is open because it was able to connect. That's the idea. So let's try running this. As I recall, it's not going to work. I could make it executable. I'm just going to type Python first. That'll do the same thing. Okay. So let's try 8888 and 53. And port 53 is open, which is a pretty strange statement, but it might in fact be open. Let's try, it's a Google's DNS server, and I thought only UDP would be open. Let's try port 59, and that's going to be closed, and it's going to take a long time to decide that because the default timeout is something like 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes or something ridiculous like that. So it's working. All right. And that's what Python looks like. I'm surprised. The int is there. Okay, good. I think in your book it didn't have the int. I added it in. If you don't have the int there, then this port comes in as a text string and you cannot use it in this place. And you'll just get an error message. So this one's been fixed. Anyway, one of the important things to notice about Python are you have these tuples. You have these double parentheses here because that's a tuple, an object with 2 values in there. And another thing to notice is this indentation. The way Python works is every time you have an if statement or a while statement or something like that it applies to commands after it, you have to end this part with a colon, and then you have to indent the next line. And all the lines that are in the block have to be indented the same amount, and it has to unindent back to here. So if you add even one space that's wrong, it will freak out on you. So if I edit this and get rid of the colors, and if I put another statement here, like print A, which is what I always do when I'm trying to diagnose things. In fact, let me put it on the open because the closed is going to take too long. So let's do the open and put print B, all right. And go back to this, 8888, 53. Okay, it's open and then it prints B. That's what I wanted. But if I add one more space here, now it's going to just crash, unexpected indent. So it's picky, the indentations are significant, it doesn't use open and close curly braces or anything like C would. So that's a little bit of Python. And the last bit is a little bit of C. If you've never used C, C is important, especially if you go on to like the exploit development class because you understand the binary structure. Bash and Python are interpreted. The commands are just executed one by one. But C has to be compiled, which is the way fast languages work. So let's do nano hello.c. All right. So you have to include libraries. If you don't include any libraries in C, you have a very small group of functions and you don't get printf unless you include standard I/O. Every C program starts with main. You do not need to include this, but it's best practice too. These are the command line arguments that might be there. argc is the number of arguments on the command line, and argv is an array of all those arguments, just like the argv you saw in bash earlier. So here it checks to see if the count is less than 2, then it's going to print an error usage message. And if you did put a name, it's going to say hello and put argv1 here. This is very much like that bash program. The point about C, for anybody that doesn't know, is you can't just run it. Even if you promote it, you can't run it. It won't run because it cannot figure out what you're trying to do, because C is not intended to run that way. You have to compile it. So you compile it and you put the output somewhere, and by tradition in Linux, you make the executable file have no extension. So now I've got hello.c down here, and I've got hello, which made it self-executable, and that will run. So if I run hello, it now gives me the help message, which is I need to pass my name. And if I do hello Fred, it says hello Fred, which is fine. And if you go into the exploit development class, we'll play a lot more fun with this, where you define a limited number of space to store that argument, and let things get too big, and on you go. This one here just took it from the command line without specifying its name, so it's not going to have that vulnerability. But anyway, that is why C is more efficient, and important commercial programs like Microsoft Word are written in C. Because something you're going to sell 1 million copies of, you write in a compiled language so that the final product will be smaller and run faster and use less memory, and also so it's very difficult for someone to steal it. If all you have is the compiled code and not the source code, it is painful and difficult to figure out how the program works and copy it. Although malware analysts do that all the time. But that is quite a job. That's what reverse engineering is taking the final product and figuring out what you can just from that. And it's quite difficult, a lot more work than rewriting stuff given the source code. Anyway, that's all I wanted to show you about that. Yeah.
So when you call up, when you're in root Kali,
Yeah.
so, when you call up C program,
Yeah.
the library's already in there?
Yes, when you have to actually Kali, it's already there. In Ubuntu, it's not. You have to do apt get install build -essential, which is, I was very offended when I found Linux that didn't include a compiler. Because until recently, nobody would think of using Linux without having to compile code, because the things you need, but now there's going to be a few versions of Linux that are so big that everything you need is pretty much already in there, or ready to go, like Ubuntu. So there are some people using it that are like Windows users that don't know how to program and don't want to program. There was a time when nobody would even think of using Linux unless they were going to write in programs. Anyway, by the way, I saw an article that said Linux is now up to 3% of the desktop, which is the biggest it's ever been. So there's always been a certain number of people that think people should be using Linux on a desktop. It's never gotten anywhere, and all you have to do is try it, and you will rapidly find out why. Linux is very painful to live on. The media won't play, the GUI never works. You just want to cry, and pretty soon you'll pay for a PC or a Mac. So very few people actually want to live on Linux. If you become a Linux system administrator and be a real expert, it's a cool thing to live on. One of my students lived on Kali for a year. And you really have to do heroic things to, like, view a web page, play a game, simple things like that. Anyway, so that's all I have of that stuff, and I wanted to show you some demonstrations, but I think before that I'm going to do some Kahoots. I have been told that the remote viewers are pretty much hosed for Kahoot because they have a 30-second delay. So you can try it, but I don't think you'll have fun if you're a remote viewer. But you people that are here should bring out, how many of you people, hopefully you have computers or cell phones or something. If you don't have any, we'll see how many people do. Because I have one reviewing what we did last time, Linux, and I have one for the programming. These are worth extra credit if you get the most right. And I see my options are set, that's good. So let's try these, see if it wakes people up.
Is this like a replacement for the iClickers?
Yes. So you go to kahoot.it and you put in that number. All right, I think maybe I've got as many as are coming. So let's try some of these. All right. So what command will show that file? .msf4. All right, so the yellow is the correct answer, not the most popular one. ls-a is what shows all files. Dot is a hidden file, .msf4, so you can't see it. Let's see if I can make this bigger. Yeah, it might work right. Anyway, all right. So which command will show you the permissions? All right, ls minus l, for long form, okay. Which one will make a script executable? All right, good, Shmode, okay. Which one puts text in the existing file, adds text to it? All right, the double greater than sign is what adds it to the end. Single greater than sign wipes out the contents before adding more. All right. And which command will change all no to yes in foo? All right, and it's the first one. Substitute no to yes, and you have to have some kind of character to delimit it, which is usually a slash. All right, which one will get you a new address by DHCP? All right. Okay, and ifconfig, DH client is the right answer. Everybody's getting it wrong. Okay, there is no ifconfig/renew. That's Windows. There is ipconfig/renew. It would be very logical and wonderful if that was true, but there's not at all. It's DH client. DH client followed by ETH0 will get you a new IP address on Linux. This won't work. That would be nice. The closest thing that will work is ifconfig ETH0 down and ifconfig ETH0 up, which will disable and re-enable the adapter, which among other things will get you a new IP address. But DH client is what, these two are exactly, this is the Windows version, and that's the Linux version of the same command. Anyway, enjoy that, and I think, all right, the winners are here. Let me make a note, and we will have more of these coming later. In fact, I might just do another batch of them right now because we're going on to a different topic. Dude, an EC, and serial killer are the winners, okay. And, all right, I think I will just do another one. You're all set to go here. I'm going to leave that one. The next one is a simple review of what we just did in programming, and then I'll demonstrate some new attacks. So, I did it right. All right, good. So 824009 is the number to join. 824009. Good. I'm going to save this in case bad things happen. This is temp Kahoot. Not HTM. All right. All right, here we go. So, what language requires main? All right, that's C, good, popular answer. Which language requires consistent indentation? All right, Python, good. All right, what language has to be compiled? All right, that's C, of course. What language uses if statements like that with the square brackets? That's Bash, not the most popular answer. All right. What language uses the back tick? Just to really annoy people. All right, that's Bash. All right. And what language would import socket? All right, and that's Python indeed. All right, so there's my winners. Let me make a note. Hi, dude and serial killer. Same, hi, dude, serial killer. All right. All right, so all I want to do is just cover a couple projects. Some of them are newer. Actually, I think they're all new. That's why they're on my mind. Beef is worth looking at, and this Slowloris is worth looking at, and so is Apache Struts. So I think let me start with the Slowloris because it's very closely related to what we did last time. And the target, I'm just using one of my servers. I'm glad I have my own servers I can do this horrible stuff to. And I can just use the Mac natively for this. So let's start by making a get script. I'm going to go to CD and then CD demo, make directory demo. All right. So let's start with something that does a head request, which we did, I think, last week, or maybe even the week before. Let's head.py. All right, so this imports socket and creates a socket object named S. Then it defines a request using this triple quote system, so I can put the carriage returns right in there. So it's going to be head/HTTP 1.1, then the name of the host, and then 2 carriage returns, which is what indicates the end of an HTTP request. So then it connects to my server on port 80, sends the request, and prints whatever comes back. So it's very simple, and let's see how it works. If I do Python head, oops, gotta hit tab, HEA. All right, can't open file. All right, ls. Whoa, where am I? I thought I moved into a directory. Let's cd into demo, ls, all right. Somehow I filed it up. All right, Python, head. All right, so it connects to my server and it gets the HTTP reply starting with 200 OK, which means everything's fine. So that's simple enough. Now I might want to fetch a web page. And the simplest way to do that is if I go to this address, 80.samsclass.info, I can go there in Chrome. It'll fetch that page. Now, if I view the developer tools, which is developer tools here, it's going to give me a page here that shows me what's going on. And if I go to the network tab and then refresh that page, it's going to show me the requests that were used to find it. There are other things down here like the background teal leaf and stuff, but the first thing that happened was the normal get. And that's what this shows me. So here's the request and there's the response. Now here it has formatted them to try to make them easier to read, but I would like to see them in raw form, so I hit view source. And that is the raw get that was used to get this from my page. So I can just copy all of that and put it in the clipboard. And without even bothering to understand it, I can use it to make my own requester. We've done this before too. I just want to show you a very simple modification of it that turns it into an attack. So let's copy head to get.py, and nano get. Okay, and so there's the request, and instead of doing that, I want to just put in all the requests that came from my browser. So right there. All right. And then 2 carriage returns at the end to make the blank line. So that is the longer request, which should fetch the web page instead of just giving me the header information. And nothing else should need to change. So if I run that, that will fetch my web page. So since I had except, someplace up here I had except gzip, it's not the encoding, except ranges. Anyway, I let it zip the response, so what I have is unreadable zipped garbage, which I could fix, but it worked, and I know it worked because I got a 200 OK. So I could fix this to see the web page response, and that's what we did before, so you could brute force servers, but this time I want to make it an attack. And that is, this is going to be the Slowloris attack. So if I copy this get to slowloris.python, to make it the Slowloris attack, all you do is remove 1 character. Now what it's going to do is send a request to the server that is not complete. The server will now wait for another packet to come with that missing carriage return, and it's never going to come. So this will make 1 extra request to my server that will freeze it. Now to make this easy to see, I've turned on server status on my server. This is an optional module you can turn on, and it's considered to be kind of a sleazy thing to do for confidentiality of people. So if anybody is using my attack server and they hope to hide their identity, they're in trouble, but I hope nobody's dumb enough to think they can do that. You can see the IP addresses of people who connect, but the part I care about here is this little matrix here. Apache server by default can only handle 150 simultaneous connections, and right now it's got 1 connection here in a waiting state, and that's me connecting to the server to see the status. So if I refresh this, there's still only 1 connection there. And let me just shove it over to the side. All right, and if I run this script, then there's now 2 connections. There's the one from me and the one from my script. So all I have to do is make my script make a lot of connections. Now the only problem is I have to keep making new socket objects. So I had to Google how to do that, and I put it in here. I may have left it for you to figure out how to make, yeah. So I mean, I'm going to make a very simple one here and leave it as your exercise to get up to 100. So to get up to 5, I could do it in a really sleazy way. Let's nano Slowloris. All right, I can make S1. This will do it. This is pretty sleazy, but all right. Then I have to do S1 connect, S1 send. I'm never going to get anything back anyway, so I don't really need to print the receive. And I don't plan to ever close anything either, so this is the kind of really, really sloppy programming, which you only use when you really don't care about impressing anybody anymore. You just want to get the. Did I follow it up?
S2, S3.
Why, thank you. I do, yeah, S2, S2, good. Okay, that should use up 5 at a time. Okay. So let's see if that works. Let me refresh this, my status, okay, and see what we got. We're back down to just 2, 1 from before and 1 now. So now if I Python Slowloris, okay, I think it closed too fast. I needed to make, it closed when it went to the end, so I need to make it wait at the end. So what I'll do, as a very simple way to make it pause, is at the end, I'm going to print receive. Because it's never going to receive anything. And that's what made it not just hang up on it. Because when the program stops, it closes all the connections right away. So I want it to wait. Let's see if that does it. Yep, now it's waiting. And now I've used up 5 extra connections with these R's. So I want you to fill the grid with 100. And there are smarter ways to do it, but you will have to figure out how to make 100 socket objects. And of course, you can make a list of socket objects, but you ought to Google that and figure that out. Anyway, I wanted to show you that. because it's a very small step forward from what we had. And when I kill it, these go away. You only need to send about one of those per second to tie up a default Apache server like mine. It's a known problem for years, and Apache decided they didn't care. They said if you want to fix things like that, you should add an optional additional component, like an IDS, to handle it. Anyway, you've been here about an hour. Let's take a break until 7, gives you about 10 minutes to wander around, and then we'll carry on with a couple more demonstrations, including the Struts attack, which is new to me and close to a very important attack, although not the one that hit the news yesterday. So, in 10 minutes, I'll show you beef and struts. So I wanted to show you beef. I had a project beef, and one student is way ahead. It's like project 16. Somebody already did it and said it didn't work, which I really appreciate somebody being up there. And it didn't work for a couple of reasons. I wrote it a couple of years ago, an earlier version of Kali, and let's see how you guys are. You notice that icon there of beef? You can click that and start beef. Now, what do you suppose the problem is with beef, this project? Any guesses? You should know by now, you never use these icons. The GUI is only here to torture you in Linux. You're wasting your time. The icons never work. It appears to start beef, but it doesn't really start beef. Beef doesn't work if you do it that way. That's the problem. You have to start it from the command line. Anytime you reach for the mouse on Linux, you're making a mistake. Anyway, so it's cd user share beef.sss, and then you start it here. And in fact, if you want to, you can put a -x here. That will clear the old database, which only matters if you run it many times, like I have. Let me make this bigger. Anyway, that's in the project. You run it manually, and it'll work. So, and you can tell because it has a much longer message telling you it's starting everything. I reset the database. Here it shows you all these different things running. It's trying to listen on a port, and it can't get there, so it thinks beef is already running on port 3000. Let's see what's going on with my network. Pant. 3000 is in fact listening, and it's Ruby. I guess I must still be running Metasploit in another browser here. Let's see. Oh, I am. All right, let's get out of Metasploit, which is running all sorts of goofy things, and we'll be playing with that a little later. And let's do netstat -pant, and 3000 is still listening. So I'm just going to reboot because I'm bored with dealing with this. All right. Because we'll be doing that in a minute. I've been doing struts all day. That's why people have been sending emails and getting absolutely no good out of it, because I've done nothing but struts all day. Anyway, but beef I did a couple days ago, and it's worth knowing about. So let's make this bigger, and I think it's still in my clipboard. Maybe not. Let's put it in my clipboard. That's right. When I restart, it cleans the clipboard out. All right. So now I start beef, and let's make this a little smaller so we can see what it says. Okay, there, now it's running. Beef server started, and you see it started a bunch of stuff, listening on 3000 here and there. So now it is running the browser exploitation framework, and this is intended to be easy and friendly to use, so it gives you a GUI, and the GUI is here, the UI panel, 3000 UI panel, this one. If you use the icon and click on it, it will automatically launch it in the browser, but then it doesn't work. So you have to paste it in yourself to end up with something that works. So, all right, I lost it. This thing here. Shift Control C, Alt Tab, Control A, Shift Control V, that kind of Control V. All right, there we are. So now I get the beef login panel. And by default, the username is beef and the password is beef. Obviously, you shouldn't use that if you're interested in security, but this is an attack tool, and you often don't bother to secure attack tools. All right, so beef is now running, and the point about beef is I can get anybody to load a page which loads JavaScript from my beef server or anywhere else I choose to put it, I can then run JavaScript in their browser. because it loads JavaScript and then it automatically refreshes every few seconds and automatically loads more, so I can run commands inside your browser. So I have to get somebody to browse to this site. And there's a demonstration site here, which we can use. So I'm just going to open that in another tab here. And so this just shows you should now be hooked into Beef. This page has a JavaScript loading command in there. And you see within a few seconds, Beef notices this. Beef is my command and control server of my botnet. Now this is a limited botnet. I'm not going to have root permissions or even shell permissions on these boxes, but I'm going to have the ability to run code inside their browsers. So I now have a Linux machine at my local host that I control because I opened that. And if I open it on other computers, I can attack them too. And this one is the attacks I decided to use in the latest version of this project are the social engineering attacks that will run on anything. So you can use your host machine, which run Chrome on it. And it doesn't matter if it's a Mac or a PC or what it is. So if but I can't use 127.0.0.1. I've got to use the real IP address of my Linux machine here. So let me open up another terminal window and do ifconfig. And there's the address ending in 188. And I want to put that address in there instead of 127.0.0.1. All right. So now, out here on my host machine, I've connected to Beef. So, if I look at my Beef GUI, over here, it now shows a second victim. And they're not Linux, they're Mac. That's the Finder icon for Mac. So that person is now under my control to some extent. And if you click on the IP address of your victim, you now can see what you can do to them. So let me make this as big as I can. I'm going to make the window bigger, if I can get this thing to pay attention to me, which does not seem to be happening. There we are. All right. Now I'm going to make the font bigger. All right. So there's various things you can do here. But the most interesting thing to me is the commands. Now, the browser commands actually attempt to exploit the machine through browser flaws, and that's only going to work with old browsers or old plugins like Flash and QuickTime and Struts and LastPass. The ones up here are what I used to have in the previous project, and they only work for a limited period of time before people patch their browsers. And because browser flaws are so dangerous, people really patch them vigorously. Almost every browser automatically updates now. So that stuff is pretty much for the birds. But what never gets old is social engineering, and that's down here. These are things that will work, but they'll never get patched by browser manufacturers because they're technically not a flaw in the browser. They're the browser running as intended. So let's try Clippy. Clippy's a good one. So if you start with Clippy, and I would shove that over if I could. I'm going to have to make things a little smaller. All right. So over here is the interesting information about Clippy. And now, let me go by my project instructions, because you have to do a little bit of preparation for this. In order to run the Clippy attack, you have to get some images. So, I'm going to execute these commands here. These will create a few files that are used by Clippy. So I'm going to go to my Kali, and go to a terminal like this one that I'm not using for something else, and put in those commands. So I go to a directory that Beef can find, demos HTML, and then I wget a Clippy tar file from my server, and then I untar it. So it creates these 4 images: Clippy main, Clippy speech, bottom, mid, and top, .ping. 4 little pictures is what it needs to have. And then I touch a file called pwnedbyname.yourname.exe. This is an empty file with an exe file extension. I'm not actually going to hurt anybody with this attack, but we'll be able to see that it works because of that. So now that I have the necessary information, I can fill it in here in this panel. And the stuff I have to fill in is the Clippy image directory and the executable. So it needs to be like that with the right IP address, and the right IP address is 188. So it's this mess demos for the image directory, which is here. That's giving me the wrong one. Okay. Okay, that's demos, and the only thing wrong with this is I have to make it 188. That tells it where it can find those pictures, and then I have to tell it where it's going to find the executable. And that is this thing called pwn by your name, which looks like a Windows executable, although it's not really, because I don't really care about actually taking over the machine. I just care about seeing how this attack works. So those are the adjustments you have to make, and then you execute. And if you go look at your target, which is here, Clippy appears. And Clippy says, you have to update something, please say yes. And if you don't say yes, he will keep reminding you every 5 seconds until you finally say yes. And this is the kind of thing, you know, people are used to this. There's also a fake Java update, a fake Flash update, a browser bar up here that appears to be one of those Microsoft Internet Explorer bars, because this is a really deadly attack. You get what looks like an update, you say yes to put on your update, and when you do, it'll connect and download what it thinks is the update file, and looks like that part is failing for some reason, but it should download that exe file. And I should see it happening here. Looks like for some reason it's not happening. Either something crashed or made a mistake in this part of it. This is where I put in the process. Oh, I had to change this number. That 187 should have been 188. So it's trying to connect to a server that's not there. So I'll just execute again. And now this poor guy is going to get another Clippy. Say, you didn't do it yet, so now you say yes. And there it comes. Here's that file. Just run that file. And here you can tell your own because I just put it in the name, but it could be anything. And you could use MSF Venom and make malware for whatever system you want to take over. That's social engineering. And there's more fun stuff you can do. There's that one. Then there's Google phishing. This one here will open what looks like Gmail and ask you to log in. And if you take a careful look, it's really going to your website up here. So if you wanted to be careful, you would actually buy a domain name that looked like Secure Google or something and put it up there, you know. And if they fill in this, of course, it goes right back to you. You get their username and password. And there's another one, which is they call Pretty Theft. It pops up a Facebook box. This is something that I don't use Facebook, but apparently this happens every now and then when you're using Facebook. And this is the kind of stuff, especially on mobile phones. This stuff is deadly because real sites really do pop up boxes. You can't see the URL. You don't know if it's secure or not. You can't see that it's going to an IP address instead of, you know, it's pretty awful. So these are pretty powerful attacks and they never get fixed. Anyway, so that's beef. And the last one I wanted to show you, oh, I was going to use the router and let people see beef live, but I think it's too much bother. So struts. Let's take a look at struts. And let me remind you, I think I probably didn't talk about it in this class last week because it had not happened yet. But struts is all over the news. Okay. Apache Struts is a product that you use for making servers for big companies. It runs on Java. Server-side Java is painful to use, hard to set up, and hard to run, but it scales to thousands of servers if you need to, and so all the big companies use it. But it is a pain to run. Tomcat is typically the web server, and there are other things that go with it. So Tomcat plus Struts lets you deploy web applications in a single file called a WAR file that is like a little zip archive. You upload the WAR file, and there's your company up there. And the Hackathon site that you used last semester, I think that's a WAR file running. Real Amazon almost certainly is too. So anyway, that's the game here. And the point is they just found a bug in Struts, and it's currently being exploited. And there are patches, they only announced it like 2 days ago, and the patches just came out, so everyone's having to scramble and patch their box. And since it's used by big companies, it's important, but since it's used by big companies, it is a very difficult job to patch them and test and make sure they don't break things, so people are running around freaking out. Anyway, I wanted to learn how to do this, and I spent all day doing it, and it turns out, as you might expect, here's the project in an overlay. First, you have to create the vulnerable server, which is all this stuff, all the way down to here, and down. Eventually, you get down to a graphical Struts environment you can deploy a WAR file with. Then you deploy the vulnerable web app. So you have this thing running called Struts Showcase, which is a demonstration file they give you just to see how it works. And you get this page, and that's the vulnerable server. And you might notice the project is nearly over. That's like 90% of the project. This is something famous about black hats and white hats. The black hats don't have to make the target. So a whole bunch of work is already done for them. But anyway, then you get to attack it from inside Metasploit. So I've got my target running. So what I did, and what I wrote the project for, assumed you're using an Ubuntu server, not for any particularly brilliant reason. It's just, that's the way it usually is used, on a real remote server, although Struts is apparently often used on Windows. But I installed it on Linux first and got that working and lost interest. So, by the way, if you are using a server version of Ubuntu, there is no desktop, no browser, you can't use the mouse at all, and you don't even have VMware tools on it. There's really no desktop, so you can't even cut and paste anything. You can't even paste commands into here. So what I do is the only command I type in here is apt-get update and apt-get install SSH server. Then ifconfig, and then I'll never type another command into this terminal again because I just SSH in to that address. So that address is 172.16.1.198, which is here. And now you just SSH in with your name. My name is student. My password is student because I don't care for these demonstrations. And now I've logged in from a terminal session and I can cut and paste into this window. So my Struts is running, and to see it, I can see what's running on here with, let me make this a little bigger, with netstat, you know this one, minus pant, we use that a lot. It's listening on port 8080, among other things. And in fact, it would tell me the ID, if it would tell me the name of the process listening if I used sudo and gave it a student password. Now it'll tell me it's listening on 8080, and what's listening there is Java, which is in fact Struts. So if I want to see Tomcat running, I can just go out here to a browser and put in that on 8080. And there I'll see a Tomcat default page. This is just a form of a web server commonly used with Java. And now, if I go to Manage, I get the Management Console. I should have, maybe it's Manager, I've forgotten. Yeah, it's Manager. Here I have the Manager, and you see here I'm running this thing called Struts Showcase, which is an app I uploaded. And if I go here, you can see I have a welcome page, and this is from the people that developed Struts, so it has various other pages where I can demonstrate the glorious features of Struts, about which I know nothing, nor do I care. I just want it to work so I can exploit it. So, but it is important to know the URL to get to this page, which is this mess here, Struts 2.230.15.1. That's the actual path to get to the page that runs Struts. And you need that for the attack, because this is in fact a command injection flaw, one of the simplest ones. In the user agent, you can stick characters which are interpreted as Java commands. They call it a serialization bug also, because you encode stuff before sending it. You can encode stuff in base 64, and it turns out you can encode stuff that is interpreted as Java commands on the server. So you can execute code on the server. So let's do that. Because the main thing I want you to learn in this class is how to run Metasploit. So once you've got the target running, we're going to attack from Metasploit, and this should be a very routine process. So let's go to Metasploit, which is in my Kali back here. I don't need this browser anymore, but what I need is Metasploit. Let's remove this. All right. So let's do CD. Okay, so to start Metasploit, by the way, to update Metasploit, you can't use MSF update anymore. It seemed to work until about last week. Now that gives you an error. The way you fix it now is apt update and apt install Metasploit framework. You just reinstall it with apt, and that updates it. And you will have to update your thing if it's a default install, because the attack we're using here is 6 months old. The one in that article came out 2 days ago, and I can't get it working, and neither can anybody else as far as I can tell. There's one guy that wrote an attack in a work in progress sort of beta testing Metasploit thing, and only one of the people that read that is able to make it work. The rest are like me, they can't make it work. So there's a missing ingredient there that we haven't figured out yet. So the one I'm doing here is a different attack, and let's try it. I've already updated my Metasploit, so MSF console, we'll bring it up. And you should be familiar with the basic progress of how to take over anything with Metasploit. You start it with MSF console, and then once it comes up, you use search to find whatever attack you want to use. And it's not case sensitive because these guys are not idiots. They wanted to make it easy, so I'm attacking something called Apache Struts. So I just search for Struts, and it will show me all the modules that attack Struts. Now these are finished modules that have passed all the testing and been added to Metasploit. So these are ones that will work. The one that came out 2 days ago is still in like a beta testing condition and it's not included by default. Now I added it. All you have to do to add it is download it and put it in a .msf4/exploits directory in your home directory, and it will be found. So now that I've done it, oh my, so many struts. There were less of them before. But anyway, the one I want is certainly in the list. I only saw this many before. It might be just wrapping on the screen funny, but you can notice the date, 2017, and the rest are all really old. So this is the one that came out in March, and it's rated excellent, which means it should work every time and not destroy the target. These other ones are more likely to fail. So there was one 6 months ago which freaked everyone out, and that's the one I'm going to use, Apache Struts Content Type OGNL. And there it is up there. That's the exploit. So once you choose an exploit to use, you type use and then the name of the exploit. And once you get in, before thinking, you should do show options. This is always your first step. Show options will show you what parameters have to be set and whether they're required or not. The ones that say no are not required. The ones that say yes are required, but a lot of them already have values filled in for you. The one thing you really have to fill in is rhost. It needs to know the IP address of the machine to target, and that's blank. But the other thing it needs is down here. I had to try it a few times before I figured out what was wrong. This is the URI that points to the Vulnerable Struts app, and as you may notice, mine did not have that URI. It had some long version number in it instead. If you look here, here's my Struts showcase. That's the URI up there, Struts to all this hogwash. And in fact, I tried just putting in the directory because the example had just the directory and it didn't seem to work. And that's the kind of stuff where you're usually left guessing. Until a Metasploit module has been around long enough that somebody like me has written detailed instructions, the original authors, that's obvious to them and they don't bother to tell you. So I just tried putting all this junk in, down to the Struts version number, then the slash, and then the part after the slash. So I'm going to set that parameter target URI equal to that. Okay, now I need to know the IP address, which is over here, 198, 172 to 198. So let's set our host to that. Now it's put in some HTTP and slashes that I don't want, so I'll get rid of them. Okay, now I can do show options again. And now, I'm just going to shrink the font a little bit so it's easier to read. Okay, now I've got the rhost is set, the target URI is set. It's universal. This confused me at first, but then I realized it's Java. It's platform independent. They're not kidding. It shouldn't need to know the OS to the host at all if it's going to run Java commands. So now I try exploiting it with exploit. And I can zoom it up again. All right. It starts a reverse handler. It's going to try to launch some kind of reverse shell, but no session was created. It failed. Now, I don't know why. When all else, so now that all else has failed, I might as well read the instructions. So, when this exploit fails, here's the actual instructions for this module, posted by the developer that put it in Metasploit. And every Metasploit module has a page here that tells you this information. This one tells you it exploits a remote code vulnerability. Important things are which versions are vulnerable. Now that I made sure we were installing 2.3.10, so we're in the vulnerable range, so that's not the problem. But apparently this is common. Payloads will be dropped to executable, dropped in a temp directory, but apparently this fails. If this fails, try a cmd/star payload. And that was, I didn't know quite what he meant by that, but I did figure it out, and here's what he means. You can change the payload. Notice something which is cruel about Metasploit. If you do show options, here's the options. Proxies, rhost, rpors, SSL, target URI, vhost. That's not all the options. It doesn't show you all the options, and it doesn't tell you that. There's another option called payload, and you can change it. But they think that's obvious, so they don't tell you. So, show payloads. This will show you the payloads that are compatible with the current attack I'm using in alphabetical order, and there are a lot of them: VNC, Command Shell, Windows, and stuff like that. Well, I know I don't want to use a Windows attack because I'm attacking an Apache Ubuntu Linux host. But if you remember, he said use cmd/star payloads. So if you scroll all the way back, there they are. These are the simplest payloads, and for some reason, which doesn't make an awful lot of sense to me, and I think it won't make much sense to you much longer either, he tells you to use these. Now, the reason he tells you to use these is because you can't write to the disk. But, so let's try CMD generic. When you look at my instructions, it's kind of hard to read that the way it's laid out on my screen. The one I decided to use at this point was CMD Unix generic. It's on that list. Here's the list in a sort of friendlier font size. So CMD Unix generic, you can set the payload to be something else, and then you can do show options again and see what you got. So that sets the payload. Now, if you choose a non-default payload, it will now show you options and payload options. And the user generic executes a command, and you have to tell it what command to use. So this will just execute a shell command. Now, I can't do something like ls or ifconfig because there's no way for the output to get back to me. I have to do something that changes something on the box that I can see. So what I chose to do is just touch a file in a temporary directory. So I'm going to put in, first let's go to my Apache Struts machine, which is here, and ls/temp, and there's a file there called foo. I'll just leave it there, I'll call one, so I'm going to do touch foo2. There is no file there called foo2 right now. So I'm going to set the command in here. Okay. Didn't catch, my copy and paste failed, which it often does. Okay, because VMware tools are hit or miss. Okay, touch foo2. So all this will do is touch a file named foo2 in the temporary directory and create it if that's possible. So do that, now exploit. Okay, the Metasploit did not create a session, but it said the exploit was completed. Now let's see if it worked. Let's go to my target here and do an ls of temp, and now there's a file called foo2. So I was able to create a file. So again, I'm sort of baffled. They told me I had to switch to the CMD payloads because it was unable to create a file. And I say, well, it sure looks like it's able to create a file. What it looks to me like is they assumed the target was Windows, and they tried to put it in the temp directory like C Windows TEMP or something. You couldn't find that on Linux. But anyway, I don't really care. Now I can execute commands on the server. So some of those other CMD commands might work, and I just tried a bunch of them until I found one that worked. I'm often down to this sort of thing with Metasploit. And I found that many of the CMDs didn't work, but this one worked. CMD Unix bind netcat, where it will just run netcat and open a shell with netcat. So let's try that one. And so I set to that payload. Now if I do show options, just to see if I have to set anything, you'll see there are some payload options, but they have good default values. It doesn't need the target address, and it just uses a port for the local listener, which can be 4444, which is fine. So I can just run an exploit. Now it runs, and it gets a shell open. Now one thing's funny is you don't get a prompt or anything, but if you try stuff like ls, you get the answer. And who am I? And date, and LSB release. See what I've got? -A. I've got Ubuntu 16.04, so this is not Kali I'm talking to anymore. This is the Ubuntu machine, and I'm root. So it worked. It's not very pretty, but it works. And so you should know the general Metasploit pattern. You start with MSF console, you search for the exploit, you use the exploit, then you show options and read it. You can also type info and read it and see if it works, and if it doesn't work, then you actually go online and read the page about it to try to figure out what the details are, and you very frequently have to go to like the comments on the commit for it to find out what to do, or find somebody like one of the teachers like me that has written the instructions, because there's always 2 or 3 little gotchas that they forgot to tell you. But anyway, that's why you want to practice with Metasploit until you're good at it. And you'll have several projects now where you practice attacking things with Metasploit. It's quite similar, and if you have a new exploit, like the one that came out 2 days ago, then it's not even in the update chain for Metasploit yet, because it's really seriously not working. The original developer got it working. 5 or 10 people have tried. Out of all the people who have tried, only one other person got it working. All the rest are complaining and leaving strange cryptic notes. I created this file somewhere and that made it work. So it'll probably be a week or two before it's actually finished and working well. So maybe by next week or in 2 weeks, I'll have that one going. Anyway, any questions about anything? Yeah.
Is the new exploit, the Struts exploit, drop you to shell as well?
I think so, but I don't know. I'm pretty sure it does, though. In fact, that's a good question, and I can find out because we've got it right here. This is the that's the one, the old one. The new one I had open here, this one. All right. Let me see if I've got it linked somewhere. It's another CV. In fact, all I got to do is Metasploit, Struts. That's probably all I'm going to have to do. 5638 is the old one, OGNL. And this looks like, this is the guy talking about installing it. Here it is, 5638, exploiting, how annoying. All right, let's get rid of Metasploit and try Rapid7, which is the company that makes it. All right, I said I could find it, now I'm not so sure. Let's take pages within the last week. There we are. Here's what you need to know. Here's the vulnerability. Patch released. Well, maybe I'm not going to find it. That's a blog. How annoying. The only other hope is perhaps I've already put it in my project. I've been staring at this. There's one page about it I've been staring at all day. Or actually for the last couple hours. I've been trying to figure out it. And I don't know if I've got it here. I think I didn't put it there. Oh, it's in the, I put it in the source code. Just a moment. I cut it out of this project. I was going to make it the second part of the project doing the new one, but I couldn't get it working. But I saved it here. So I could hopefully figure it out. And here it is. Okay. This is the actual attack. Let's try this guy's GitHub. It's just on somebody's GitHub right now. And if any of you people are good at Git, you can probably help me find it. This is the Metasploit Framework GitHub. And somewhere in here is the actual exploit. So let's try GitHub and the CVE, which is somewhere. I'm losing my mind. Here's my view source. There, the CVE is GitHub Struts Metasploit. All right, I'm going to quit if I don't find it in the next few minutes because I'm lost. I've got notes somewhere of how I was doing it. It's not this 5638. It's a later one.
Is it 9508?
Yeah. Can you find it?
I don't know.
You see it somewhere? Because this is March 6th. This one is still 5638. All right, I can't find it. I'll have it next week. I was looking at a page all day, but anyway, it's interesting. I'll show it to you when I get it working. But there's no point hunting for it now. Any other questions? All right, I'll just clean up and go up to the lab. I'll help anybody who wants to work up there. There's a guest next week, and after that, things will become due.
It's CV 2017-9805.
9805, all right, good. I'm glad you found it. So let's see if that'll work. 9805, I knew it was some later number. Good, let's see if this works, because somehow I can't find it, which I don't understand. I found it with these searches earlier today, but okay, and is there a Rapid7 somewhere? Semantic, pen test it. Anybody find it? Somewhere is the exploit. Oh, it's linked from that article. This is it, finally. Okay, good. It's linked from that article by Dan Gooden. That's how I found it. Anyway, this is still not it. Somewhere is the stinking Metasploit module. Here? There, that's the module. But somewhere is the discussion about the module, and I don't know how to find a way back from this garbage to the real GitHub user. Let's try that Jen Gooden article. I think in here, release through Metasploit. There, I guess this is how I found it. And it doesn't, okay, good. Thank you. I guess it just matters. So this is the source code for it, or this is the information about it. And here is his people trying to test it and it doesn't work, which is what happened to me. And here's more people complaining. This guy said he got it to work by creating this file, but I don't understand where he created it or what it does, or how he created it. And here's the original author claiming it works. So people asked, can you get a shell? And he got a command shell here. And he claims the Python shell worked too, although when I tried to use the Python shell, it said Python shell is not supported by this exploit. So this is what you usually find. It's kind of a mess right now. The original author got it to work under certain conditions, and it doesn't work for most anybody else. This is how everything is. Hopefully they'll get it working a little better in the next week or so. But, all right. Any other questions or helpful comments? All right, I'll clean up and go to the lab. Oh, and if you won the Kahoot, you got to tell me who you are. A couple of people have given me their name, but I still have a few names I do not have, like EC and Dude.